I think it's fine to have compassion and empathy and circumspection and understand some of the reasons why a person may do what they do. But you aren't their shrink. And the more you make these excuses, the more you are left carrying the burden of self-blame. Have you ever heard this? Patience is a virtue. Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it's not. And maybe it's a little more subtle than that. So let me break this down in terms of narcissistic relationships, because that's what we do with these proverbs. We take them and we apply them to the vexing issue of these difficult relationships. Now, the original saying of patience is a virtue actually comes from the Latin maxima enim patientia virtus. Patience is the greatest virtue. I took Latin in high school. I was really good at it. I got like a prize for Latin, so I had to get that one in there, okay? So the Latin take on that was patience is the greatest virtue. So we're going to break this proverb down like we do all the others, but some of them are spot on, like they're the perfect survivorship experience. But some of them, they tend to be enably. And this might be in the enably pile. So bless Oscar Wilde, who went on to say that patience is the most overrated virtue. In the world of narcissism and narcissistic abuse, this proverb is actually, I personally think, a little bit dangerous. This proverb, patience is a virtue, is often used by enablers who use it to give the narcissistic people a second chance and a third chance and the benefit of the doubt and all of that. It actually plays upon the concept of future faking. So when the narcissistic person makes all kinds of false promises, things like, I'm going to change, I'm going to be better, I am going into therapy, I'm going to get off social media, we are going to spend more time together, we're finally going to take that trip, I will stop interrupting you. This proverb, patience is a virtue, is often used to rationalize a person waiting longer and longer for the narcissistic person to come through on promises that they are never going to come through on. People will keep telling the person who is stuck in the narcissistic relationship, this good old proverb, they're going to say, oh, come now, patience is a virtue. And the stuck person waiting on all of this future faking, who is already doing their own cognitively dissonant justifying, they will fall back into the idea of the virtuousness of their patience, and they'll just keep on waiting. And in the blink of an eye, another 10 years has passed as you keep doing all of that virtuous waiting and patience. Now, when it comes to waiting for a narcissistic person's promises to change or for them to come through on whatever so-called promises that they're making, I'm going to be honest with you, patience is probably not a virtue. It's a scam and becomes part of the larger enabling system to keep people stuck in these relationships. People who find themselves in any kind of narcissistic relationship will hear things like, you have to give it time. You haven't waited long enough. Relationships take a minute. Be patient with this person. BS. I do not believe that people should ever be patient with manipulative or abusive behavior. When this behavior happens, you either leave or you disengage or you set really, really high, rigid boundaries. Patience? Nah. But I'm going to throw you a curveball here. Patience actually can be a virtue. What? Yes, it can. When? After you figure out the narcissistic relationship for what it really is, perhaps after you get out, or if you stay in while you set boundaries, and you work on your own healing. Because then the patience is about the patience with yourself. People often find themselves getting angry at themselves for taking too long to get better, that they should be over it. And they find themselves falling into the vat of euphoric recall. Healing from narcissistic abuse is a personal process. It takes as long as it takes. There is no clock. There is no magical 6-week fix-it plan. There is no magic pill. In the best of scenarios, it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Healing from narcissistic abuse is triggers that pop up years later. It's the fact that the narcissistic person still finds their way into your dreams and nightmares even after 10 years. Even driving by a storefront or going into a neighborhood restaurant where you once sat with the narcissistic person can evoke strong emotions, sadness, and confusion. You think, what the heck is wrong with me? Am I not over this? Yeah, you are, but it takes time to heal. And I truly believe that narcissistic abuse at some level changes you forever. No, I don't think it's all bad. Yeah, you know what I believe, and I've said this again and again. I actually think that people who have been through narcissistic abuse are often a lot more interesting than those who have not. There's an edginess. And the changes you experience after narcissistic abuse, they aren't all bad. But the process of recovery, and getting your footing, it takes time, and you need to be patient with yourself. That's a virtue. Then there is an interesting twist on patience. Patience and playing the long game on the hope that the narcissistic person will finally get their karma, that they'll finally have their fall from grace. You know damn well it's a fantasy that we all have, that the narcissistic person will one day finally get it stuck to them by life, that they'll finally piss off the wrong person, that they're finally brought down or shamed publicly, that it finally doesn't just all go perfectly right for them. But here's the rub. If we spend too much time stuck in the revenge fantasies, it means that the narcissistic person is still taking up too much of our precious mental real estate, and at least a part of our heads are still in the relationship, and we don't want that. That's not good for us. I always tell folks, especially those who get out of these relationships, you already got revenge. You got out. The narcissistic person is stuck being them. That's not so great. Their petty, small, insecure, reactive, superficial, emotionally and intimately empty lives, their incapacity to see the beauty of small things. It's a really empty, bereft, and awful way to go through life. So if you're free of them, you won, because they no longer have you close to them. They lost. Unfortunately, most survivors don't see it that way. I wish they did, but they don't. You'll get there. Most narcissistic people actually, in a weird way, do get theirs. They get that, whatever that metaphysical revenge is eventually. In most cases in their life, just about everyone walks away from them. They lose their power in the world as they get older. They may get taken down by scandal or breaking the rules one too many times. Maybe their shiny new partner that they left you for leaves them. Or they lose their money on an arrogant investment. Or, and this happens more often than you think, they simply grow old alone and the world forgets about them because they did not cultivate loving relationships, sustainable relationships with other people in that way that we do when we really go deep with people. So in that case, yeah, I guess it is about being patient, because yeah, the revenge rarely comes on schedule, does it? And for many people, by the time it comes, the narcissistic person's life kind of face plants into the world. You no longer care. You may have a rueful chuckle about it, but you may have reached what I consider to be the pinnacle of narcissistic abuse recovery. And we all know what that pinnacle is. What is it? Indifference. So no, patience is not a virtue for people in narcissistically abusive relationships, though it may be a virtue for those who are out of these relationships. I think that a better writing of this proverb is, patience with yourself is a virtue. But as for the people out there who are around you, who are manipulating you and invalidating you and treating you badly, no, they don't deserve your patience. There is no virtue in being a psychological punching bag for another person. Lots of people in the world of positive psychology and cheery Instagram posts talk about gratitude. They have gratitude. And yeah, gratitude will leave you happier and healthier. I was recently reading over a student's thesis. She had an entire section on gratitude, which I read over quite carefully, and then I reread again. She cited multiple studies speaking to an association between gratitude and happiness. I paused after reading that section because it really made me wonder about narcissistic relationships. People who are being narcissistically abused get lots of bad advice because basically a lot of the advice givers out there repurpose the healthy-ish relationship guidance and try to use it for narcissistic relationships, and it doesn't quite work that way. Relationship gratitude often involves thanking your partner for stuff. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for being you. After you throw up in your mouth after saying that to the narcissist over and over again, you can see that all you are doing is doubling down on giving a narcissistic person supply. A narcissistic person who may think, well, I guess I'm all that in this relationship because they're saying thank you. And of course they're saying thank you to me. Why wouldn't they? I'm great. Now, most relationship books are not written for people who are in narcissistic relationships, just as most content out there is not written for people in narcissistic relationships. And that can be confusing. Gratitude journals, gratitude in relationships, it seems easy, and yet, especially when you are supposed to show gratitude for the person in the relationship as a tactic to make the relationship better, it simply does not work. But there is too much good research out there supporting the power of gratitude, and I completely agree about its power. So how are people in narcissistic relationships supposed to benefit from it? There is a lingering belief, especially driven by the trauma bond and the powerlessness that can be felt in these relationships, that you always need to do more. Do more for them, to make them notice you, to win them over, to make them see you. And the gratitude stuff can actually play on that self-blame. You may think, oh shoot, I wasn't grateful enough. I didn't show enough gratitude. I didn't find that one good thing they did, which is basically like trying to find a contact lens in a swimming pool. And maybe it's me, right? I'm the one who's sour. I'm the one who sees the glass half empty. If I really try, I will see that they actually closed the refrigerator when they were done. I could have thanked them for that. Nah. Before long, you will be thanking them for eating the dinner you prepared for them. How can you, though, benefit from all of this research that says that gratitude makes you happy? Here's a thought. Move the focus to yourself. It won't be easy to do because you keep focusing on other people. The only way a narcissistic relationship works in the long term is if you focus on other people, namely them, and appease them and the enablers and engage in the whole dog and pony show that is a narcissistic relationship. The reason gratitude seems to work is that it forces your focus into the moment. We all sort of barrel through life, getting things done, not stopping to notice the rather miraculous things that are happening around us. And that is where the power of gratitude can come from. The narcissistic relationship is a unique form of bad luck in your life. But there are many other things in your universe to feel grateful for. These could include things in your environment, the weather today, the bird outside your window, the bee that's actually doing its whole pollen thing, your dog, your cat, things you notice when you take a walk or a drive. To hell with a narcissistic person. Every hour you can find something to be grateful for in your environment. Our natural environment is full of gratitude-inducing stuff. Another thing are the things you can do or taste or feel, something you read or something you ate. I am a very bad vegetable grower. I don't really have the setup for it where I live, but somebody gave me a few tomato and pepper plants, and I took care of them all summer and got about 4 tiny little tomatoes. And I ate them, and when I ate them, they were so good, as sweet as could be. And there were so few of them, I ate them slowly, and I savored them. But I then thought, people out there can grow lots of these tomatoes. And I go to the store and I buy them and I eat them without thinking. And I know how much work went into growing those tomatoes, and it's amazing. That tomato moment can become a tomato moment of gratitude. Then there are the things about yourself you can notice. Maybe you were sick and you got better and your body's working fine again. Maybe you have a bad knee, but you got up the stairs and it didn't get you down. Maybe you went to the doctor and got a clean enough bill of health. It could have been different. And we can take a minute and recognize when physically we're functioning well. I am not telling you to see the bright side of things. I think I'm allergic to optimism, especially empty optimism. But the power of the whole gratitude thing is that we take a moment to attune to the moment and pull something out of it. It's not about turning something bad into something good. It's not about half-empty glasses becoming full, but rather, what a gorgeous flower, or the sky is so red tonight, and I'm thankful I live in a place that looks like this. The mindfulness piece is where the win is happening, and training and focusing on the gratitude-inducing thing is a bit like lifting weights to strengthen a different set of muscles. This isn't about walking around and muttering affirmations to yourself like, I'm thankful for the itty-bitty birds. I'm thankful for the air in my lungs. It's not that. It's about noticing things that might matter to you and maybe even just made your life easier or more pleasant for a moment. It's the attuning to the environment and seeing what there is. Hell, it may just be that I'm grateful that the roof didn't leak in the last rainstorm, or I'm grateful I woke up this morning, or I'm grateful that the milk isn't spoiled, or I'm grateful that the holiday today means that there's less traffic. There are always things to take notice of. But the key is to not feel compelled to interlink this in with your narcissistic relationship all. Feel the gratitude separate from the narcissistic relationship. None of the, I'm so grateful they didn't yell today, or I'm grateful that they didn't pick up their phone once during dinner, or I'm grateful that they didn't gaslight me. No, we are not grateful for that. They should have done it in the first damn place. So many folks in narcissistic relationships are surrounded by enablers. I hear this from people who, for example, may be married to narcissistic folks with money and are told, but you should be grateful for your big house. Or who might have an elderly narcissistic parent. Be grateful that your parent is still alive. I miss my parent. Okay, sad for you, but that is not related to this person's experience. Or for people who have a narcissistic boss, be grateful for the great benefits in this job. Absolutely not. Forcing yourself to find the gratitude in an abusive relationship is a form of self-harm. But those moments that are yours, sensory moments, physical moments, creative moments, those belong to you. Your moments, not interlinked with the narcissist, just yours. Find those gratitudes, because then over time, you create a universe that isn't about justification and rationalization, but rather is about you creating an ecosystem around yourself that for a moment is good. And you get to see yourself just as you deserve to be. We all do. If you want to harness this gratitude stuff, make it about you, your moments, your environment, your life, nothing else. No, you do not need to be grateful for them. But taking that moment, and even if it is being grateful for how the sun lights the orangey undertones of your cat's fur, it forced that moment of recognition, of being in the moment and out of the rumination. And that is a massive tool in healing and managing anxiety, rumination, and the obsessive loop that plays in many survivors' minds. Rethink your gratitude, and perhaps you may get that downstream effect of serene happiness, separate from the narcissist. As you know, so much of the healing from narcissistic relationships is you justify the narcissistic person's behavior. It's the nature of the trauma bond. You know the usual rationalizations from all your work you've done in healing, right? The usual rationalizations are things like they don't really mean it, they are stressed, they had a tough childhood, they are insecure, I feel sorry for them, they lash out when they feel cornered, they have so much shame from an earlier part of their life, they were bullied. You know the list, you've done it, right? You've written some of this, you've come up with all of them. Some of your rationalizations and generalizations are based on what is happening in current time. For example, they had a tough day at work. Some of it is based on stuff from the past. They had a rough childhood. Some of it is self-blaming. Maybe I'm being unreasonable at expecting them to help with dinner. So here is what you are doing, right? The narcissistic person's behaving badly. What else is new? Whatever it may be. Perhaps they're yelling at you or gaslighting you, or they're really reactive when you ask for something simple, or they're passive aggressive. They're doing things that don't feel good. And your go-to is quite often, I wonder why they are doing this. Let me try and figure it out. So here is where we get into this sort of odd question that I get over and over from podcast interviewers and psychologists and just about everyone. The question is, how can all of us just learn to be more compassionate? Compassion heals. Let's be compassionate towards the narcissistic person. I kid you not. That is the question that is put out there. How can we be more compassionate? After all, they are insecure. They have shame. They may have a tough backstory. And their behavior at times is bordering on the delusional. So we really need to find some compassion for them. Let's put a pin in this, right? Because I'm going to be coming back to this point. Now, this is the issue that many survivors face who ask themselves, right? You ask yourself this, well, maybe I can find a way to be more compassionate and understand why they behave the way they do. Listen, on this channel alone, I have talked ad nauseum about the why of narcissism. It's clear why. It's also kind of sad, but trust me, Your story is pretty rough too. However, the point of this video is to make the point that you are able to dive into this rather deep well of compassion you have for people who have not been very nice to you, who have manipulated you, raged at you, betrayed you, and lied to you, mocked you, humiliated you, ignored your needs, and had no empathy for you, but yet you found some way to find compassion for them. You constructed it from their backstory, their current story. You made sense of their psychology, and good for you. That is not easy to do. But the problem is, it's not good for you to do. The challenge I issue to you is this. If you are able to do this, dig deep into all of this compassion you have for the narcissistic person who is or who has harmed you. Try and do this for yourself too. If you are able to construct this elegant theory of why they are the way they are and do what they do, why can't you do this for yourself? In this relationship, you often think you're the problem. You did the bad thing. You are the issue. Well, we know that's all the trauma bonded dance. Okay, so bear with me. If that's the case, we now know you're able to be compassionate for a badly behaved person. You're doing it for the badly behaved narcissistic person. So if you're behaving badly, show the compassion for yourself as well. So for example, when you say, oh, I'm so demanding, I'm being so difficult, I'm expecting them to help out with the kitchen after they had a long day. You had a long day too, but you focus on theirs. Perhaps you can say, I'm asking for help because I had a long day myself and I could use the help. When you say, maybe I'm not trying hard enough in this relationship, maybe it's my problem and I'm not communicating clearly, you can try, I'm trying my best to make my point, and I also grew up with a tough mother who never listened, so not being heard is difficult for me and makes all of this harder. When you believe that maybe you're a bad person for getting angry or raising your voice at the narcissistic person who lied to you, you could try, well, I was exposed to anger all the time as a child, and nobody listened to anyone in my family. Here's a rub. I don't love these explanations for you, right? You aren't a bad person for having an honest reaction to someone who betrays you. You are communicating clearly. They just aren't listening. And they should be helping you in the kitchen. But since that's a little bit of a heavy lift for survivors, to get to the point where they see the situation clearly, at a minimum, try and come up with compassionate justifications for your own behavior. You're doing it for the narcissist, just do the same thing for yourself. At least it's a more self-kind place to begin. You can't win for losing in these relationships. You get the BS message about how you need to find compassion for someone who is so riddled with shame. Remember how I asked you to put a pin in it? Well, survivors have to carry all of the compassionate and emotional baggage in the relationship. Be compassionate to the narcissist is what you hear. Make everything work. Communicate. However, it's an inversion, a reversal, because nothing is coming back at you. The relationship is an eternal one-way street, and it ain't coming in your direction. So the same way you are able to find compassion for someone who is so unkind to you, who leaves you feeling less than and inadequate and foolish. While I understand some of how you are able to do it is the complex web of trauma bonding, some of it is still conscious. You are making an active attempt to try to find a compassionate way to understand the narcissistic person. And of course, there is always the damn specter of cognitive dissonance, which is why we are often creating that compassionate response for the narcissist, which helps lower that sense of tension. They are my spouse, parent, fill in the blank. I need to be kind and show grace. That stance can help lessen that cognitively dissonant tension of, this person is terrible. Oh, they're my mother. Shoot, that doesn't fit. So you find a way to make it fit. Can you do it for yourself? Show this compassion. After all, if you can find compassion and make excuses for someone who you are increasingly aware is behaving badly, and you believe you are behaving badly, shouldn't you be able to apply the same skills and be compassionate to you? Try it. What's the worst that could happen? Forgiveness, forgiveness. It's such a big topic, you know how I feel, but what gets lost? Really gets lost when we keep talking about forgiveness. Let's take that on. I don't need to say it again. I think my point of view on this now is pretty clear. Forgiveness is a topic that messes with the heads of many survivors who believe that they are being a bad person, or they have the experience of being shamed by other people for not forgiving. That you might feel that not forgiving is actually at odds with your own values. So you forgive, and the narcissistic person behaves badly again. You forgive, they harm you again. You forgive, they betray you again. You forgive. People might think you're so nice for forgiving. You know the cycle, enough of you have done it. Some, more than a few people, have hit back at me and tell me that I'm a bad person, or this is terrible, for saying people don't need to forgive, and that life is complicated, and that forgiveness is the only way to move forward. Actually, it's not. Plenty of people heal, and may even heal better, when they don't forgive. And the research supports this. Forgiving someone who keeps betraying you is bad for your sense of self and for your overall mental health. But let's sort of peer deeper into this dynamic. Because what happens is often this. The narcissistic person betrays you or emotionally harms you, as they do. You may have forgiven them many times, but this time you don't. They call you out for not being forgiven. They sort of conveniently forget that you forgave them many times before. They tell other people that you didn't forgive them. And then the merry band of enablers comes for you. And this really happens a lot in narcissistic family systems. And that family system will say to you, oh, come on now, you aren't all that either. None of us are perfect. People make mistakes. And really, are you going to mess up, fill in the blank on whatever family occasion it is, your sister's birthday, our family reunion, the baby shower, whatever the hell it is, because you can't be more forgiving? And when you remind them of the number of times you have forgiven, and then the narcissistic person betrayed you again, and you forgave, and they did it again, and again, and again, those people and the narcissistic person may even go a bridge further with some gaslighting and say, oh my gosh, you're always bringing up the past. But you brought up the past to fortify your position on forgiving. So now the entire conversation has shifted to being about how you are not forgiven, or even that you are selfish or rigid or mean or cold or withholding. The conversation is fully shifted to that. And what gets forgotten in this conversation? The narcissistic person's bad behavior. It feels like a mental explosion, right? When you don't give in to the forgiveness pressure or do forgiveness the way other people think you're supposed to do forgiveness, then you are branded as the problem. And in this forgiveness pylon, what doesn't get recorded is that there was bad behavior, problem behavior, harm, betrayal, whatever it was, that even raised this conversation about needing forgiveness. But the bad behavior that even started this whole process, that all gets lost. And there may even be an unwillingness to call the behavior out, the narcissistic person's behavior out, as problematic. In the worst cases, the narcissistic person's behavior may be reframed as being fine or normal. Things like, oh, couples fight, or sometimes people say things they don't mean, or they didn't intend to hurt you, or people sometimes slip. A core issue in healing is the willingness to identify a behavior in a narcissistic relationship as problematic. I think it's fine to have compassion and empathy and circumspection and understand some of the reasons why a person may do what they do. But you aren't their shrink. And the more you make these excuses, the more you are left carrying the burden of self-blame. Even if you aren't going to leave a relationship, and as uncomfortable as it is to live in cognitive dissonance, it's important to be able to clearly identify a behavior as problematic and harmful. What you do with that is up to you, but at a minimum, being able to see and register bad behavior as bad behavior is important. Many systems, especially family systems, try to minimize that in the name of maintaining the status quo, or it's just sort of an ongoing carrying on of toxic intergenerational patterns. Then there is the issue of our attachments and our psychological safety. You may have become a mega forgiver because it becomes a way to remain safe in a system or in a relationship. As long as you kept forgiving, you would not be abandoned. So after a while, the forgiving becomes an automatic response, it becomes a safety response, but because you really thought deeply about whether you truly forgive or have let go of resentment, but rather that you forgive because it kept you safe, and then sets up the most toxic cycle of you feeling compelled to forgive so you can remain attached, so you can remain in a system, them harming you and them facing few consequences, and even getting your forgiveness on top of all that, you can see how this can escalate to emboldening a narcissistic person to a point where they start behaving worse and worse and doing more and more harm. But this forgiveness mess is messy. And when you start to notice that the entire focus is now on you as being cold and as lacking humanity for not being forgiving, and when you do bring up the transgression that even raised this issue of forgiveness, that you are shut down as bringing up the past or being petty, you are reminded of why the greatest wounds in these relationships are not the broken hearts, but the being made to feel crazy. So by the time it's done, like I said, it's like the crime gets forgiven, but we definitely continue to point the finger at the person who pointed it out in the first place. So being aware that this dynamic is a thing, my hope is that it does leave you feeling less, if you will, insane, and more realizing that you are seeing this clearly, uncomfortable though that may be. Thanks again.